It is indeed a pleasure to have as our guest this evening Mr. Ruzbeh and Bharucha, or simply Ruzbeh as he's fondly called. Ruzbeh is already popular amongst our readers who know him by virtue of his book Conversations with Dada Vaswani, which was a part of the reading list at some of our centers, and also by virtue of the popular video interview series with beloved Dadaji. Over the course of 40 plus intimate meetings with him, he helped us understand our master perhaps better than ever before, gathering Dada's insights on just about every topic and providing a lifelike portrait of his innocent and loving nature as a perfect disciple and a reluctant master. Ruzbeh is also the author of 19 published books, a documentary filmmaker, a journalist, music composer, lyricist, singer, and public speaker. We are indeed privileged to have you on board for today's meeting, where we will be discussing the chapter on the great saint Meher Baba from the book Saints for You and Me by beloved Dadaji. Ruzbeh, as you may know, has a deep reverence for Meher Baba and beloved Dada. In our current chapter, we were introduced to Meher Baba, a sacred soul who even through silence transformed countless souls and showed them the way of pure love. Sadhu Vaswani, along with beloved Dadaji, met him on a few occasions, and beloved Dadaji referred to him as a remarkable man and a great teacher of humanity. Welcome you, Mr. Bharucha. We have already received from book club members across the globe certain questions which we shall be putting forth to Ruzbeh during the course of this session. And to facilitate tonight's global meet, we have our very own Lavina Khemchandani, the brain behind beloved Dada's book club. Lavina was born and raised in New Jersey and has had the blessing of being guided and guarded by Dada since birth. She currently works in product marketing at Audible, the audio entertainment division of Amazon. Her career is a perfect match for her hobbies. She loves books, writing, graphic design, music, and travel. With Dada's blessings, she hopes to stop talking about writing a book and join Ruzbeh in actually writing one soon. If you would like to pose a question, dear readers, kindly post it in the chat box below. Also, a gentle reminder to keep your microphone in the mute position to ensure smooth communication during the meeting. Welcome once again. Over to you, Lavina.
Thank you so much, Angelica, for getting us off to such a beautiful start. And thanks again, Ruzbeh, for joining us for this session. We are truly honored to have you. We've been looking forward to this. I think as Angelica mentioned, our previous book here in the US location was your book. And every single session we were like, if only we could have this book club with Ruzbeh and just get it straight from the author. But alas, we have you now, so we will take full advantage. Please don't mind us. So we are reading this book here, as Angelica mentioned, Saints for You and Me, written by Dada. We just finished the chapter on Meher Baba. So the place I would like to start is early on in Meher Baba's journey, we read about his encounters with the 5 perfect masters. And Ruzbeh, you've discussed this at length in your books and your blogs as well. If we look over to Conversations with Dada that you wrote, you have this discussion on Meher Baba as part of a broader conversation where you and Dada are talking about the different masters that he met early in his journey, including Meher Baba, including Ramana Maharishi, several fakirs and darveshes. And your entire career has been blessed with this opportunity to meet saints over and over, to research them, to get up close and personal with them. And here we are trying to do the same thing in our own small, broken way through this book, through reading it, trying to internalize. So starting there on that topic, the company of saints, which our tradition calls satsang. Why is it important? What is the value of the interaction with these great ones? How does it change us? How has it changed you?
First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be invited by your book club. I remember asking Dada, what did he feel when he met Avatar Meher Baba? And he told me he felt pure love. And he said, in his every gesture, there was only love that came through. So it's a very strange mix. If you read about Meher Baba, like I've just finished a book called The Twilight Songs, where I've interviewed people, devotees who have lived with Meher Baba, who have spent time with Meher Baba. And they're all above 65, 70 years old. And virtually everyone who spoke about Meher Baba and their experiences with Meher Baba cried. You know, they're all senior citizens and each one wept. They were choked with emotion. I think what really, really transpires when you meet a saint or an avatar is, number one, you get the wisdom and the strength to go through your life calmly. Sometimes the avatar might, or the master might take over your karma. But usually, the master blesses you to be able to go through life with dignity, with calmness, and with joy. In fact, one of the quotes of Meher Baba, where he says, whatever happens, remain in a good mood and be cheerful despite your reeling brain. And I think this is what really takes place between a disciple and a master, where the disciple gets the strength and the wisdom to go through life calmly and with dignity. Each one of those who I met for the book, they all had gone through personal trauma and loss. They all had gone through their own troubles and pain and misery. But each one, because of the grace of the master in their lives, could go through their trauma, their experience, their ordeal in a calmer and a more dignified way. And I think this is most important. That is why our scriptures keep saying, go to pilgrimages, meet masters, spend time with evolved souls. Not because they are going to take our karma. It's because they are going to fortify us and equip us to be able to go through life with dignity, calmness, and a sense of humor.
That absolutely rings true for us as well in our experience with Dada. And I feel like that covers perfectly what the masters have to give us. What about the flip side of it? What do we need to do? How do we tune ourselves to be open and receptive to what it is that they're emanating, that they're radiating? Is there anything that you did in particular before your meetings with saints, before your meetings with Dada, to just take it all in?
Listen to me, it's very simple. You got to empty yourself. The mind has to be calm and blank. The ego has to be zero. You need to understand a pebble is meeting a mountain. You need to understand that the master knows what is best for you. Then you meet the master. If you go filled with yourself, if you go filled with your ego, then you're not going to absorb or take back anything but your own complexities of the mind and your own ego. You need to be empty to be filled with the master's energy.
Taking that notion of the stone and the mountain that you just mentioned, that sometimes instills the sense of awe where you can't even speak, you can't even if you have questions, you can't think of them to ask them in the moment. And yet you manage to get so much out of Dada for us. The questions that so many of us never thought to ask, because coming before Dada, we were just turned into stone, literally just in awe of him. Nothing came to mind. We were a little too blank, maybe, to that point of emptiness. So how is it that you had that presence to ask those questions, to, help us get to know Dada better than we already did, perhaps?
I'll tell you what, the humility that Dada possessed, the sheer magnitude of humility that he had, just put me at ease. He never made me feel that he's such a big, evolved master and I am a nobody. Yeah, the credit goes to Dada, it doesn't go to me. It goes completely to Dada. And I feel that when you love your master, when you truly love your master, words are of no importance. I mean, you just got to surrender to your master. But surrender yourself, surrender the ego, surrender the mind. Not just, intellectual surrendering. Not just surrendering on the tongue. Once you do that, you're just free.
That conversation about words and the place of words versus that place of silence is going to be a big topic for us. But just a couple of questions before we get to that, before we ironically spend a lot of time speaking about silence. On this same subject of the company of saints, you had this conversation with Dada that where you brought up a really interesting point about how when Meher Baba was in his physical form, there were so many other saints in Maharashtra at the same time that there could have been a spiritual renaissance, a spiritual revolution. And as you mentioned, saints have their sense of humor. Dada answered you in his typical style that, Ruzbeh, we needed someone like you to bring all of the saints together to get that spiritual revolution going. And that was obviously Dada being Dada, for lack of a better phrase. But have you thought about that since then? Have you reflected and gotten any answer as to why these masters work individually with us one-on-one and they don't, band together and enact this spiritual revolution that you sort of described?
I'll tell you what, I've given this a lot of thought. And I've come to the conclusion that each master has his or her own department. Okay? Let's take Sai Baba of Shirdi, my guru. Who flocked to him? The very poor, the downtrodden, those who could barely keep body and soul together. His job or his work profile, if I may dare to say, was to give those people who flocked to him a push in their environment so that their body and soul could be kept together and then they could focus on spirituality. Sai Baba Shirdi always said, you need to have your stomach full. Only then can you focus on God. Meher Baba's followers were different. He had foreigners and he had a very educated class coming to him. So his department was different. Just as there is a difference between fruits, in the same way there is a difference between the masters. And each one will gravitate to that particular fruit which appeals to that individual's sense of being. We have so many religions. I think that should have been enough for a spiritual revolution. But what are we doing? I mean, how badly have we abused religion? So I believe also that we have a personal destiny with a particular master. And you will gravitate towards the master based on that particular destiny of yours.
Beautifully put. One more thought on this broader pillar of the company of saints. So you mentioned your book that's coming along, Twilight Songs, I believe you mentioned.
Yes, yes.
I've seen a couple excerpts of it. We read your article on Sadhu Vaswani Saint Veg, which you had actually written before your coming into contact with Dada directly.
Yeah, yeah.
So and then recently in one of the satsangs where you graced our sangat, you shared this experience that you have after Dada left the body, in which he gave you this dream and explained to you that even flowers have life.
Yeah.
So clearly all of these saints, running through all of these three examples, is this power that they have to live on even without the help of the body, to continue to influence us, save us, enlighten us, and give us everything they were giving in the body even after they've left it.
True.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that? And if you have any other experiences that you can share where Dada has communicated with you or taught you something, or given you the ability to feel his presence in some way since he's left the body, please share.
I remember once I wasn't feeling too good. There was somebody very close to me who had spoken very ill of me to a number of people. And I remember I'd gone to interview Dada, and I thought I was quite composed, and we conducted our interview and we shared a few laughs. And then he told me, Ruzbeh, you're on such a path that you will have people throwing roses and stones at you. If you can accept the roses, you very well then better accept the stones too. I was reading a quote of Meher Baba where he says, one can overcome greed and even lust, but by far the worst and most difficult habit of all to eliminate is that of speaking ill of and trying to find fault in others. And Dada had told me something very, very similar. He said, forget everything to do with spirituality. Do not harm anybody. He said, if you can do this, just this much, he said, Ruzbeh, you will be pleasing your master and the very heavens. He said, forget prayers, forget pilgrimages, forget every ritual. If you can just abstain from harming anybody through action, thought, or word, you are fine. Now, what I'm trying to get at is, how many of us really live by the simple philosophies of our master? How many of us do not speak ill of somebody? Gossip and slander are so common in our day-to-day activity. And if you go through the philosophies of all the masters, they are basically saying the same thing. Good thoughts, good words, good deeds. But how many of us are really implementing it? You know, we may know everything of what the master has said and what the master has spoken and written and where he has gone to deliver what. We may know all that. But how many of us are really living the good life? So, you know, this is a question that we need to ask ourselves every day. Is immaterial who you're following. For me, Sadhu Vaswani, Dada Vaswani, Sai Baba of Shirdi, Meher Baba, Avatar Meher Baba, they all come from oneness. They all speak the same language. The problem is none of us is really implementing anything.
Absolutely. And that's actually a perfect transition to the next topic I wanted us to get to, which is discipline. This point about the masters telling us what they expect of us and us not following. Meher Baba seems to have made sure that at least for his closest disciples in his mandali, that was not the case. He, was known as a strict disciplinarian.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned the word dictator once or twice. And we have this quote in this conversation that you had with Dada in Conversations, where he explains that sense of discipline as follows. He knew human nature. He realized that a human being, if left alone, would defile the very best. Therefore, he pulled them up. So the first question that comes to mind is, what type of discipline, what practices, what principles are they that can lift us up? What is it that Meher Baba enforced among his closest disciples?
I always joke that Meher Baba was very militant in his love. He was very clear. If you want to walk the path, obey. Live your life joyously, no matter what happens. Keep quiet and obey me. In fact, he has written this particular quote. The nature you are born with remains with you, but you can modify and change through obedience and surrender to God. So he knew that most people were caught in their inherent tendencies and nature. And the only way to rise above it was to obey the master. The only way to rise above one's samkaras and karma and tendencies was to obey the master, period. You know, stop thinking from your little brain and start obeying, period. That's it.
So is it fair to say then that the specific rules that he might have enforced with the mandali are less the message than the concept of obedience itself?
Yes, he was fanatical. But he came through love. He knew what each individual required. He understood what was needed for each individual. In fact, I was reading a bit on Meher Baba, and he said that don't judge people by the morality. Morality is nothing. Each individual is led by his or her samkaras, past life tendencies. And he says, I know who is being led by what. So I know how to handle my people. For Meher Baba and for a lot of masters, obedience came above everything else. But when do you obey someone? When you have completely surrendered to that someone. And when do you surrender to that someone? When you are hopelessly in love with that someone. So eventually everything comes with love. It's all about love. Now you got two options. You either love your master or yourself. There is no third alternative. So Meher Baba knew that it is best that you just obey me, for God's sake. I know what is best for you. Don't use your little mind. Let me sort things out.
I think we, even Dada had that same conversation with you on multiple occasions where he said things like, 8 out of 10 is not enough, 9 out of 10 is not enough. When you're obeying the master, it has to be 10 out of 10 every single time.
Yes. And Meher Baba wanted 11 out of 10. And he was very open about it.
Most of us are still working on 1 out of 10.
Yes. I always tell this, I've written this innumerable times in my books. You cannot be partially pregnant. Either you're surrendered to your master or you have not surrendered to your master. Either you're surrendered to your master or you have surrendered to your mind. That's it.
So coming to one of the topics in which, there were three main things at the end of this chapter that Dada mentions Sadhu Vaswani really admired in Meher Baba. The first of them was silence.
Yeah.
And just bridging over from discipline, among the few things that Dada was very clear to us about that he expected us to obey him in was practicing silence.
Yeah.
So to start off, Meher Baba's vow of silence is explained in that quote on page 120 in our chapter. Man's inability to live God's words makes all teaching a mockery. Instead of living the humility, purity, and truth of God's words, men had given way to hatred, greed, and violence. Because men have been deaf to the principles and precepts laid down by God in the past, in this present avtaric form, I observe silence. But then I found this excerpt from your book, Rabda, where you allude to the fact that there was more to the vow of silence than that. So rather than giving any spoilers from that excerpt, I'd like to turn it over to you to help us understand what was the purpose of the vow of silence.
Okay. Once Dada told me that whenever we had a problem and we used to go to Sadhu Vaswani would tell them, go sit down in that corner and be silent. You will get your answer there. I truly believe the goddess God Guru resides in silence. When Meher Baba took the vow of silence, which lasted for nearly 44 years, What was he trying to tell us? Whatever he was trying to tell us, obviously, he's not got into our thick heads, but what was he trying to tell us? He was trying to tell us that everything has already been spoken. The masters have come, the avatars have come, and they've given mankind everything that is needed to know on how to live with dignity and how to walk the spiritual path. Obviously, we have not listened to anything. What is the sense of me once again reiterating the same thing? So that was the obvious thing that he was trying to get. Now, according to me, what was he also trying to say? The silence the mind, silence the heart, get a grip on your tongue, because the pathway to hell is paved by wagging tongues. Our rishis and our munis and our yogis and our saints were not stupid to go to the Himalayas and meditate. They didn't do it because they got some masochistic kick out of sitting in minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, semi-nude. They knew that if they wanted to merge with the goddess God Guru, they could only do it through silence. And I believe Meher Baba tried to tell us that. Go within, go into silence. You will find the one who resides in all within you too. Another important reason for silence is, once again, backbiting, slandering, gossiping stops. Do you know the amount of karma you prevent from being generated by slandering, gossiping, and backbiting? But how many of us really have understood Meher Baba's 44 years of silence? So,
There's a point that Dada makes in the chapter that I think, putting it another way, he says that Meher Baba always emphasized that his silence was not undertaken merely as a spiritual exercise, but also as a vital connection with his universal work.
yeah.
So is this what you're referring to? Is that what the universal work is?
See, Meher Baba did a lot of universal work. He did a lot of work in the spirit world, in the astral world. For him to be able to do that, it was necessary for him to go into seclusion for long lengths of time and maintain silence. So that was the other reason for him to go into silence. But I'm sure Meher Baba could have done it even while talking. I think he was just fed up of mankind.
I get it.
Yeah. I think he was just fed up of mankind.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
This concept of, God is found in silence. Dada put it as silence is the mother of God, and you just mentioned it in very similar words. That feels like a level that we have to level up to, but there is some starting point where we have to build up with a beginning and turn silence into something productive, something communicative, make our silence communicative. Is there any practice, any sort of simple exercise that has worked for you in that starting phase to get
over? It's a very simple thing. It's a very simple thing. When a thought comes to you, first of all, don't fight it, don't encourage it, come back to the moment. This exercise will slowly start stilling the mind. Okay? Every now and then, sit down for a few minutes, blank out, and just be. Now, when you blank out, thoughts will come to you. Once again, don't encourage them, don't fight them. Just come back to your breathing, come back to your chant. Okay? And Sai Baba Shirdi, a lot of time in my prayers has said, he's given a very powerful mantra. Okay? So I'll share that mantra for you. The mantra is shut up. Okay? It's very, very esoteric, ancient mantra on walking the path of spirituality. Just shut up. You will be doing yourself huge favor karmically and spiritually.
I love it, and it's making me hesitate to say anything further.
No, that's it. So be in the moment. Don't encourage thoughts. Don't fight it. And shut up. I think if we can incorporate this into our life, trust me, a lot of our baggages will drop. A lot of our baggages will drop.
In explaining Meher Baba's silence, Dada put it in a certain way. He said that though Meher Baba uttered no words, he communicated most forcefully through the language of the heart, the language of love. And then in Rabda, you have this excerpt. Love is a silent emotion. Thus, God's main vehicle, love too, is silent. There is no greater love expressed to God than that of silent devotion, silent selflessness, silent surrender, silent acceptance. Silence is the key that unlocks not only the doors of heaven, but also the doors of self-realization. So we talked a little bit about that, getting to know yourself in silence, silencing the thoughts, but this connection between silence and love, can you elaborate on that?
See, once you go into the state of silence, the next thing that envelopes you is something called oneness. Silence leads to oneness. And oneness can only come about when there is universal love. The love that Meher Baba had for every being came forth from oneness, which was strengthened by his silence. But I would say, forget all that. Just try not to speak ill of somebody. Try not to gossip and slander. Start with that. I think if you can start with that, that itself will slowly take you into the highway of silence. You know, there are 5 elements that make the body. Ether is one of them. What is ether? Ether is space. And what is space? Is silence. So, Sadhu Vaswani was so insistent on silence. So was Dada. So was Meher Baba. Come on. These folks knew what they were talking.
They knew what they were talking.
Space is nothingness, and nothingness is silence. Rajiv, that's what I'm trying to tell you. And that is our fifth element, the most abused element in our body. The most scarce element in the body is silence, nothingness.
So silence was the first of those three qualities that Sadhu Aswani was highlighting in Meher Baba. The second of them was love. We know that there's some, bridge between silence and love, and that universal oneness that you just mentioned. And we've all experienced that other level of love from Dada. We know what it feels like. But what is it exactly that makes that love different from the kind that we give and take what we are capable of? How is the love of the masters different? And is there any way that we can, progress towards that apart from what we just discussed?
Our love is usually a business agenda with the other person.
Transactional.
Okay. It's a lena dena. Forget with others. Our love with our own master is a dhanda. Where you're talking about, others. We don't even leave our master in our business transactions. The avatars and the masters, when they love without an agenda. They just love so that you rise beyond your samkaras and your tendencies and your karma, and you merge and become one. They don't have any give and take with you. They don't have any kind of expectation. There's a particular quote that Meher Baba has written. Happiest is the one who expects no happiness from others. So learn to love and give and not to expect anything from others. This is just a glimpse of how the masters love. They do not expect anything. They just want to pull you out from darkness into light. We do not even leave our gods and goddesses and masters in our love affair. Anything goes wrong and we, blame the master. That you have deserted me, you have left me, I had faith in you. Bas kya? We don't leave our masters, so where are we going to leave our spouses and friends and children and all? Where? So I don't think a human being should be talking too much about love. No. You want to learn about love? Get a dog home. You will learn more about love from a dog than all human beings put together.
I hope my parents are listening.
Yeah.
So speaking of that level of love that, they're at and we can't get anywhere near, in that love, they suffer a lot. And that's the third quality that Sadhu Aswani emphasized in Meher Baba's life. Sadhu Aswani himself went through so much suffering, so much pain on account of his love for us. And we witnessed Dada undergo that as well. In fact, one of my most vivid memories in the recent years was a talk that Dada gave. He had just left this New York, New Jersey area. And the next stop on his yatra was London. And he was experiencing extreme pain. He had a back injury. He gave a talk. He gave a virtual satsang lying down on the bed. And I think for myself and for many of us on this call, like that image is burned into our minds of Dada, the one we knew to be, so lively and energetic and independent, lying on a bed and still making the effort to speak to us, still giving of his love so generously in that state of pain. And it's a bittersweet memory because it's so emblematic of his love for us, but at the same time, we feel like terribly guilty like the worst people on earth. Why is he doing this for us? And every time we think of the master's pain, that's the thought that comes, like, why we're not worth it? Why are you doing this for us? Like, just immense guilt, immense, self-loathing is probably not even too strong a word for it. And as Dada puts it in Conversations, it is not easy for the disciple to see the pain of the master, but the guru has realized the blessings of pain. And you had tons of conversations with Dada on this. I think, you talked about it being the guru taking on the karmic load. You talked about pain as an instrument for the guru becoming closer, feeling closer with God. So in those conversations, particularly with Dada, and in what you witnessed of his pain, of his suffering, what did you learn about this whole phenomenon, and how can we look at it differently? What should we be learning when we're observing that, apart from self-loathing and guilt? And what little can we do to learn to embrace pain that way with a smile?
Avatar Meher Baba had two major accidents, one in the West and the other in India. By the end of his physical life, he was physically a broken man. And he always said that it was important for him to go through this for the well-being and welfare of all of mankind, all beings. Just like Sadhu Vaswani and Dada Vaswani, even Meher Baba suffered from a major hip issue. He could barely walk on his own. Why the masters do all this, knowing how dim-witted and self-centered and selfish human beings are? I have no idea. I mean, they must have deep love for us, to go on coming and go on sacrificing themselves, go on being in pain so that we are uplifted and we can live happily and a normal life. And in return, what do? Nothing. We remain the same. Each one who follows Dada Vaswani, follows Sadhu Vaswani, each one who follows Avatar Meher Baba, should remember the kind of suffering their masters have gone through for the well-being and upliftment of all of mankind. They need to become better human beings. I think we are missing the point. Instead of feeling horrible about their suffering, why don't we justify it by being better human beings? By being kinder souls. Meher Baba has said, "To him who suffers in my darbar without complaint, I will give the greatest benefit." In Sufism, Sai Baba of Shirdi used to say, poverty and suffering are very important for one's spiritual growth. To go through pain was necessary to burn away the karmas of their lot, their disciples and their followers. But have we really done anything as a mark of gratitude for our masters? I don't think so. We keep mouthing things. Dada said this, Sadhu Vaswani said this, Meher Baba said this. We know all their quotes and everything, but are we living it? I don't think so. None of us are. None of us are. And that's where the tragedy is. I think that is where Sri Krishna was the wisest. He knew these guys are not going to change. He just came, did his magic, had a blast, and went back. All the other poor masters and avatars, oh God, the kind of suffering they took on because of us, not funny. Not funny.
So just recalling that suffering then is the, if we are to learn how to bear, to endure the little fraction of suffering that we experience once in a while, and bear it with a smile as they did, the tool for that is just remembering their suffering and how they went through it for us.
The tool is, my master suffered so much for me. Can't I just suffer in silence and yet be in joy, knowing that whatever I am going through, my master knows best? Please understand, if your philosophy is Dada knows best for you, then in your suffering also be in joy. It's not easy. Whoever said spirituality was easy, no. Spirituality is a pain in the ass. But what to do? We are stupid. We are trying to walk that path. So then do it joyously. Rona Dhona doesn't suit a spiritual person.
That is a perfect place to wrap up this portion of our session. And it brings to mind a prayer that Dada shared with you in the book, yes, Father, yes, and always yes. So perhaps that's something that we can walk away with, a mantra straight from Dada that can instill in us, hopefully, that sense of joyous acceptance.
Dada would keep saying, Shukar.
Right. That's why in our bhajan book that we use for our satsangs, there's no word repeated more than Shukur, Shukrana. And there are maybe 6 versions of bhajans that are all called Shukrana. So when we have a satsang, it's like, which Shukrana should we do? Which of the 6?
If you can just follow this word and make it your life mantra, you're going to be sorted. No matter what happens, if you just say Shukar, without a frown, huh? Happily.
And hopefully we can count on you to remind us whenever we start to forget. We can always just 1-800 Ruzbeh ji.
Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, Dada is not the body. Avatar Meher Baba was not the body. They are with us yet. The question to ask is, how much are we with them? They are with us. No two doubts on that. The question to ask is, how much are we with them? That's important.
There's a lot for us to think about in silence and carry with us from this session. I just want to make sure, Anjulika, Jogan, if you guys can chime in if there are any questions that came through in the chat that I missed, anything major that anyone wanted to ask about, if we have the time. Or did we cover it all?
Lavina, I think we covered most of the questions. Yes.
We have one question. Lavina, I've actually sent it to you.
Just taking a look. Sorry, Auntie. Is it this one? The saints have the ability to absorb their own physical pain. Dada, Sadhu, Aswani, Meher Baba all did the same. We have personally seen Dada in Dubai in anguishing pain, but he had a smile on his lips. What are your thoughts on how they are able to do this? I think we just went over that.
Yeah,
that's covered. Yes.
Right.
Somebody has asked about the pandemic. I don't believe God has any role to play in the pandemic. Okay. Poor God, he's got absolutely no role to play. Pandemic is created by man. It's like, I get a liter of milk, I put it to boil, I forget about it, and all the milk spills over, and then I blame the cow. Please leave God out of this whole thing. God is all merciful. But we are so dim-witted that we are capable of destroying ourselves. We are anyway destroying ourselves, first of all, in the name of God only. So I don't think the pandemic is God created.
So I think we've covered a lot of ground, and this is a good place for us to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Ruzbeh, for your time and for helping us understand, whatever little we could understand. I think 2 brief takeaways we have that hopefully we can carry with us, because they're so short, succinct, and um, in your signature style, shut up and shukur. If we can all just
More than
take
enough.
shut up and shukur with us into the new year, we'll have a lot to learn from. Thank you once again, and I hope we get to hear from you again, perhaps in another session of our book club.
Sure.
There's a lot that we need to learn from you. I'll turn it over to Rani Auntie to close us out.
Thank you, Lavina. It was indeed a privilege to have Mr. Ruzbeh Bharucha, an eminent and renowned author, as our guest speaker today for our global book club session. Your insights were full of wisdom, and we have much to reflect on. You have shared with us priceless experiences with revered Dada, which has inspired us to make an optimal use of our internal potential in order to seek the one. We are grateful for all the knowledge gained from your kind and esteemed self. Thank you very much.
Thank you.